BTS is a consultancy firm specializing in the people side of strategy. What started in Stockholm 3 decades ago is now a global player operating across 6 continents. BTS says it equips leaders for tomorrow, inspires new ways of thinking, builds critical capabilities, helping people and company evolve together. From our position here in Davos, I spoke remotely with CEO Jessica Skon, and I started by asking her why BTS calls itself the unconsultant consulting firm. Jessica, thanks very much indeed for joining us. First of all, BTS Group calls itself the unconsultant consulting firm. What does that actually mean?
Well, first of all, we don't do things for our clients. We actually help them do it, and in a way where they feel proud and ownership and it actually gets done. Secondly, we don't learn a bunch of things from our clients and take that knowledge and expertise into the next project. Our actual intention is to build the institutional wisdom with our clients so that they can share it at scale, adapt, and pivot quickly. What's been really fun is since our inception, we just recognize that each company is unique. In its nature, you have a unique position in the market, and therefore the problems that the company has to solve and the shifts that they're driving are unique to them. So given that obvious point, I think the way we've looked at things like how the strategy and budgeting process is done, how does a company enact change, how do you establish an operating model and a culture over time, that's one that can be adaptive and pivot while still strengthening the type of culture that's critical to your unique strategy, I think is what makes BTS really unique.
And what is simulation culture and how is that practiced?
So a simulation culture is one that allows teams to test drive the job. It's one where everybody in the company, from the CEO and the executive team all the way down to the front lines, they feel like they've had ownership, that they're the ones who drove the change, and they hopefully feel happier and more joy on the other side. So the strategy process is no longer external firms doing a bunch of research and putting the thinking together for the team. The strategy process now is one where there's scenario planning with modeling that gets everybody on the team to roll up their sleeves and really test drive and play out the future scenarios. Number one, that makes sure that everybody is understanding and has shared ownership for the next direction of the firm. But number two, it also drives a practicality around what are the next moves and actually how is it going to be implemented. Another change we're seeing is just if you think about overall change and how an initiative gets implemented or a change of working gets driven in an organization. Look, 80-point plans don't work, right? Telling people to change doesn't work. The more authorship you have in the change process, the more likely you're going to have ownership and the teams are going to feel like they did it. But that's also not enough. Let's say 7,000 people have to change how they work on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis. They have to have the chance to test drive that change. They have to have the chance to prepare for it, to practice it, to give it a run, to make mistakes, to fail, to push the boundaries without consequence. And creating that type of environment and experience for the teams to actually practice the new ways of working, it's remarkable how when a team actually understands something, they want to give it a go. I'd say moving forward, learning is really no longer perceived as a way to disseminate a best practice. Instead, we see learning as a way to basically institutionalize real-time the most important knowledge or shifts in an organization at scale and quickly. If you think about hiring or deciding who to put in your most critical roles, it's no longer hearsay, somebody's past performance. It's actually observing how they actually perform in the job. And it's possible to do that now with high fidelity simulations that actually model the role, whether it's a country leader or a CFO or a high performing salesperson. If you think for a minute about how many mistakes get made on a regular week to week basis in a company, I would say that traditional view of those is that that's okay and that people will get better and better over time. Maybe, 3, 4, 5 years they'll become really good or masterful at something. I don't think that's necessarily the best way to just accept it. You can think about a simulation culture as when a mistake is made that's consequential. It could be a leader's response in a plant that makes the plant less safe. It could be a salesperson on one of your important deals has an old way of thinking about it, and therefore the company loses the project. Whatever those mistakes are, if you have a simulation culture, it means it's immediately getting codified, visualized even, and then sent out so that the teams can experience that same moment and stop themselves from making the same mistake.
Why is it important to make company strategy personal for every employee?
Look, some of the biggest mistakes I think companies make, and there's something about even being an organization or a company that I think, and human nature that makes this happen, and that's allowing it to become corporate. And the mistake of using corporate speak or strategy speak. I think unintentionally that's a form of exclusion. And when you combine that common cultural practice with the fact that most strategy gets created and thought about by a very small number of people, it's nearly impossible for thousands of people in an organization to actually understand it, right? It's impossible to know what's most important. How should I lead my team slightly differently this year than last year? Should I prioritize this metric over this metric? So an absolute essential moment in the company is if and when you're setting your top priorities for the firm and they need to get executed on, I think the responsibility of the company is to make strategy personal for every employee in the organization. The best way we know how to do that, because strategy is complex and business models are complex and not everybody has, financial acumen and like a fingertip feel of the business model, is to break it down into a super practical, concrete, even micro simulation of how does executing on that priority feel in the new year. One of the technology-driven shifts that we expect is a probabilistic approach to planning all the way to earnings calls and earnings reportings and overall running of the operation.
Now, BTS has double-digit organic growth. What, in your opinion, has allowed this to happen?
Yeah, we're really proud of our performance the last few decades. In fact, we went public in Stockholm, on the Stockholm Exchange in 2001. And if you were one of those early investors, you've enjoyed, on average, 18% shareholder return, something that we're proud of. So the question is why? Right, what's behind that growth and that success to date? I mean, obviously, I think the world has appreciated our view of consulting, which is very different from traditional consulting and traditional HR consulting. So the nature of the services is quite differentiated. Number two, we have a highly entrepreneurial culture, right? What that means across our 24 countries is that our frontline consultants feel empowered. They feel like the company has their back. They are free to care for the clients, to meet them where they're at, to listen, to bring their full creativity against each client's unique problem. We're not the firm that's designed the 8-point plan to this and everyone just has to push it and stay on point, right? So that entrepreneurial culture, that sense of freedom allows for tremendous co-design between our clients and our teams. And when you have co-design and co-authorship, the problems tend to get solved and the work tends to get done. We have described our culture as one that's both high-performing and big-hearted. I think those two are mutually reinforcing. If you just have, a super high-performing intense and it's driven from shame or fear, I think you can get performance for a while, but not superior shareholder returns. I think those are some of the reasons.
The final thought then, how will BTS continue to help companies drive change at scale?
Driving change at scale seems to be a major competitive differentiation moving forward. And it's not just like one change that's going to take 12 months to do. It's rapid evolution based on how the market's evolving and what the company is learning and the next problems to solve. And so what we've realized is actually the practice, instead of just traditional comms and town halls and memos and so forth, the operating mechanism of converting whatever it is you need people to do differently into what we would refer to as a micro simulation is a much more powerful way for an entire organization or entire function or business unit to get it. Right? If you put people into a situation where they would typically act a certain way or sell a certain way or lead their teams a certain way, and all of a sudden they're forced to do it a different way, and if you can give them that experience in a high fidelity type of way, they tend to wake up, right? They tend to get it instantaneously. They trip over themselves and they fail, but they're failing in that safe environment in the microsim, which then gives them, in a way, the confidence to go and do it the better way with the teams. So that's one mechanism of thinking about change at scale that I think is unique and actually quite powerful.
Jessica, thanks very much indeed for joining us.